So our special guest today is Sarah Jules. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Sarah, and how you got started in the horror genre.
Well, I suppose my love of horror started fairly young. My Nan Carol, bless her heart, she used to go to the market on a Wednesday and she'd always come back with a book for me. As I got a little bit older, maybe 13, she started bringing back Stephen King books and Jeffrey Deaver books. And for years, that's pretty much all I read, just Stephen King, Jeffrey Deaver. And around that same time, one summer holidays, I was a little bit bored and I found a list of the top 100 horror films and decided that summer I was going to work my way down the entire list, and that's what I did. And it was horror films, the old-fashioned slashers, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, all that fun, really gory stuff.
Brilliant. So what was the first horror story that you ever wrote?
So my first book, I'm never really sure whether to categorize it as a horror or a thriller, and I think it kind of walks the line between both. So my first book was Found You, and I published it about a year ago. I think I published it October 14th last year. It was a bit of a labor of love. So a bit of background on me, I suppose, is that I used to be a teacher and left teaching due to the impact on mental health, and it was just a crazy time. And I didn't really know what else to do with my life, and so I stumbled into freelance writing. So I had a degree, I had a master's degree, and I was like, I need to find something else that I can do with this. And I signed up for some freelancer websites and started ghostwriting for clients doing memoirs and things like that. So I've now been doing that for 5 years. I run a writing services company. It's Sarah Jules Writing. So I do ghostwriting, editing, proofreading, and all that fun stuff. So I spent the last few years writing books for other people. And I always used to joke that I didn't have any ideas for myself, and that's why I did ghostwriting, because other people told me what to write. And then a few people had been saying to me, just do it, just write a book and see what happens. So that's how I actually started. I thought the main reason I jumped into this sort of genre is that I'd seen, certain indie authors like Frida McFadden going crazy big for writing fairly simple books, and I was like, well, if she can do it, I can do it. So I thought, let's give it a go, and that's how I wrote Found You.
Fantastic. And how's that gone for you?
Well, I mean, it's been a bit of a learning curve. So when I first started the process, I was like, right, I want to be traditionally published. I want to do it, properly. So I started the whole process of trying to find agents and all that jazz. And I had some pretty good feedback, just nobody really wanted to take the book on. And I thought, I gave myself a timeline, and I was like, if I haven't had an agent pick it up within the next 6 months, then I'm just going to self-publish it. And that's what I did. And I think it's taken me a solid year to kind of learn the ins and outs of self-publishing. And because it's not something that people really seem to talk about a lot, or they didn't. I think it's getting a bit better now. So I kind of stumbled through self-publishing on my own for the first few months, and then found a bit of a community. So Jim Odie, I'm sure you know him, he's a brilliant author, invited me to join his little group on Facebook of UK horror authors. And from there, I just kind of learned how to do it better because it's just such a crazy thing to do, and nobody tells you how to do it. And Amazon's always throwing spanners in the works if you self-publish, and just having people to have as a sounding board was kind of a turning point for me, because seeing all these other people do it and release these incredible books, through self-publishing, in doing that, I've found my people, my niche.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine doing anything other than indie publishing now.
You've got more control, haven't you, when you do indie publishing?
Yeah, and you've got a group of people. I can only imagine that being traditionally published feels fairly lonely. But the community, especially through books of horror and platforms like that, it's such a fun time to be an indie author, because you get to connect with readers, you get to connect with other authors, and the tides are turning. And I do think indie authors are going to be making some pretty big waves in the publishing community over the next few years.
Yeah, I agree there. So walk us through the process of how you develop a story idea. So where do you get your ideas from?
So I normally start when I finish a book, I've normally got another few ideas in my head for the next one.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely terrible. I've got about 5 books that are half written at the minute, and they're just sitting there staring at me. So the only way that I can finish writing a book is to plan out the entire thing chapter by chapter, which is annoying and takes a lot of time. Yeah. I'm definitely not somebody that just does it by the seat of the pants. I have to sit and I have to plan. And I think that maybe comes from the ghostwriting side of things, because in ghostwriting, you're telling somebody else's story using as close to their words as you can. So it does have to be planned out properly. It has to be well thought out and intricate. And I think I've just kind of trained myself to work like that. Yeah. So the ideas that I get kind of come from all over the place, really. So my first book, Found You, was a revenge horror, I suppose, revenge horror thriller. And it's based on a teacher. So my background is teaching, and it goes between 2 different viewpoints. So the teacher, it's present time, and then the other character, Savannah, it's a story that's told a few years before. Yeah. And her story kind of resonated with my own in a way, because so she struggled quite badly with bullies and just getting through university life in one piece.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the stories come from, people that you meet, things that happen to you, places that you go. My second book, Don't Lie, is based on a group of university friends that go on a final blowout to a lone caravan on a cliff top. And that story actually came from the fact that I went on holiday with my family, and there was this lone caravan on a cliff top, and I was like, oh, I wonder what kind of people would go there and what would happen to them.
Fantastic. So how do you go about creating your characters for your stories?
For me, characters kind of always come second. So I have a very basic storyline in my head before I make the characters. And then I like to plan, same with everything, I plan them out in detail. I even have a little Pinterest board of of photos that I think might look a bit similar to the characters in my book.
Yeah.
And I plan everything out from personality to the way that they speak. Some characters speak with contractions, things like that, and others speak more formally. I always like to plan backgrounds. And I think that maybe comes from playing The Sims as a child.
Yeah.
Because I used to love that, and I just used to love creating backstories for people. And for me, I think that's the best part of the writing process. I love making characters. And if that's all I could do and I didn't have to write the book afterwards, I think that's all I would do.
So what particular tools or like your software do you use to keep track of like your story, your plot lines and characters?
So I write in Word. I'm really simple, and everything else I actually do on paper or on whiteboards. So I have a stash of whiteboard pens, and I have glass patio doors. So I just write all over the patio doors and plan the story out like that. From that, it then gets put onto revision cards. So I have like a little ring binder I'm insufferable, aren't I? It's terrible. I have a ring binder of revision cards. So I have one for plot, one for characters, and that's how I keep the story going. From that, I then type it into the Word document. So as I'm writing the book, I've already got all the chapters laid out in front of me, and I just have to write what I've written the notes of.
It's brilliant. I mean, it works for you. I mean, there's a lot of people who do the seat of their pants, don't they? And then there's a plot, everything down to the very fine detail.
I'd never finish a book if I did that. I've tried that before, and that's why I've got so many that are half finished.
Sorry. Yeah, it's. I think it's down to the author, isn't it? Of what works best for them. But it's nice to know how authors do it, because every single author is completely different.
Oh, definitely. And if I said to somebody I plan out every single detail, they might look at me like I'm an alien. But then when they're saying they just wing it and see what happens, I'm like, how on earth can you do that and stay on track and manage to finish it? I would love to be able to do that. I think it's incredible when authors can do that. I'm completely in awe when they say they can.
I think it's incredible how they I've had some authors on that have said that they know the ending and they work their way backwards.
Oh God,
yeah, I would do that.
That sounds like torture.
Yeah, I'll take my hats off to him. That's just amazing.
Yeah.
So do you normally sort of like explore any themes or messages in your stories, even if you're doing it, I don't know, on purpose, or it just flows into your work?
I think a lot of my books are based around people. I'd like to think that they're fairly character driven, and I think that does tend to come across. I like when things take you by surprise. So that's something that I'm always trying to include in my books. And I once heard somebody say that horror can't have twists because that makes it a thriller. And I'm like, no, think about all those horror films that you watched as a kid, Friday the 13th. It's not Jason, it's his mum. Like, you would have never guessed that. So I think I like to write horror with twists, and I like to take things that might sound fairly mundane and make them tricky.
Yeah.
So another big theme, I think, and I think I do it subconsciously, and I've only just realised this talking to you now, trying to think what's similar between both of my books. Mental health. Both of my main characters in both books have ongoing mental health issues, whether it's caused by the events that happen in the book or whether it's come from before. And mental health is something that's fairly close to my heart anyway. So the reason that I left teaching was that I was struggling really bad with my mental health. I've diagnosed depression, anxiety. You know what? Most writers have that, I think. It tends to come through in the work. But yeah, I think mental health and kind of talking about it in a way that makes it not sensationalized. It's just a normal thing that character is dealing with, and it's not necessarily the whole plot of the book.
Yeah. I think with horror, you can do more or less whatever you want to.
Yeah.
As long as it's sort of like within the horror bounds.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I've had a review that said that novellas shouldn't have twists.
What?
Yeah.
What's the point then?
But twists are good. I think, as you say, Friday the 13th, you would never have expected it to be his mum.
No.
So, yeah, I do think that twists are good in horror. And I think it's allowed, to be fair.
Yeah. If I read a 300-page book and there wasn't a single twist in it, I'd be pretty peeved, to be honest.
So are any of your characters inspired by your own experiences? I know you sort of like touched on this.
Yeah, not specific people, although people have said to me, without going into too much detail, oh, that character reminds me of so and so that you knew at school. And I was like, oh yeah, that might have been a little bit on purpose. But it's not necessarily inspired by specific people, more specific personality traits that maybe I didn't particularly like in the person. And I really like, and I had a lovely review, and it was a 5-star review, and this person said it was, cracking book, loved it, hated every single character in it. And I was like, I love that because I like writing hateful characters. I just love writing because we're all flawed and we all try and hide how flawed we are. So I'm just like, why not make it really, really visible just how awful most people are? Not all people, but it's really easy to write, in the stereotypical way of the virgin dies, once they've had sex, the black person dies first and all that stuff. And I'm just like, but let's look at the personality behind them and let's make that the reason why they're being targeted, not anything superficial like race or the choices that they're making about the body. Let's make it, these are hateful people and hateful things are happening to them.
Yeah. You have to make them relatable, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think, in every character that there's redeeming factors because nobody's all bad. Even the killers aren't all bad. Everybody's got a reason for doing what they do. And I like when characters have, multiple layers. You can be like, I hate this about them, but I kind of understand why they are that way because of this.
Yeah. So what's the hardest part about writing a book in the horror genre?
Oh, I mean, writing a book in general is hard. And anybody who says that writing a book is easy, I think they're either deluded or they're lying. Especially when you work a full-time job or you've got children or real life gets in the way. So writing any book, anybody that's written and published a book, I take my hat off to because there's a lot of care and effort and time gone into that.
Yeah.
But writing in the horror genre specifically, I think the hardest thing is people outside of the genre and their preconceptions about what it is that you write. And that's why I wanted to market my first book more as a horror thriller, emphasis on thriller, than just pure horror. Because if you say to somebody that you write horror books, as somebody, that reads may have been shit or, those, because I like those books too. But if you tell somebody that's not a horror reader that you write horror, they immediately look at you as if to say, well, what's gone wrong in your life that makes you want to write horror? Why do you like scary films? Why do you like scary books? So the preconceptions of what it is that you write, I think is the hardest bit to overcome. And I would say to anybody that says they don't like horror, they probably do if they read some of those thrillers out there, because a lot of those, if they were marketed differently, would be horror books.
Yeah. Some thrillers do sort of like cross the genre, don't they?
Yeah, and I think it is all down to how they market them. Horrors and thrillers, a lot of the themes are similar, and maybe the only thing to distinguish the two is a little bit of gore or something that's a little bit of a harder subject to broach.
So what's been the most difficult scene that you've ever had to write?
Oh, difficult scene. I'm not sure about a specific scene in general, but the hardest part for me is when you finish writing a book and you realise that, there's scenes missing that you then need to go back and add.
Yeah.
So because when I finish the first draft, I have that, oh, I'm done, fabulous feeling. And then you realise, actually, no, I have to go back, I have to edit, I have to, add in all the extra detail that I missed in the first pass.
Yeah.
So writing the additional scenes after, especially when, so my mum and my auntie, shout out to them, they're my beta readers every time, and they are brutal. So they will say, you need to add more on this character, this scene needs elaborating on, take that out, it's not relevant. And if they say to me, you need to add more scenes about this in, I always want to cry a little bit, because the thought of going back and adding extra scenes to a book that in my mind was already finished,
Yeah.
I find really difficult, because it's just a pain in the ass.
So
But we need them. We need people like that to tell us when it's not as good as it could be.
yeah, it's always nice to have that support as well.
Yeah, and I'd rather people say if there's something missing than just say, oh yeah, no, it's great.
Yeah.
Just give me the feedback. I can take feedback. I don't mind, which is why I don't necessarily mind reviews that are a little bit lower than I would like, especially if they're constructive, because nobody goes into a book wanting to hate a book. So if a writer maybe says, I would have liked a little bit more of this, a reviewer, sorry, I'd like a little bit more of this in this book, then I'm like, do you know what? Fair enough. Maybe that's something that we can look at for next time.
Yeah. So that moves on to our next question, actually. Memorable feedback. Have you got any that you can share with us?
Yeah, I had I do. I'm terrible. I go back and read every single review. I'm that person. And I know that, reviews are for readers, blah, blah, blah. But if a reader has taken the time to leave a really well thought out review, then I'd like to, thank them for doing that. Even if it's, not the best review, somebody's taken the time to sit and read your book and write a review. And I think that needs to be, acknowledged, because as indie authors, I mean, you'll know this, we basically live for reviews. Reviews are what gets our book out there. Reviews are what makes it more visible. And we need that. And as much as it's irritating to have to, go, can you please leave a review if you liked it? If somebody's taken the time to do that, there, especially when you've not asked, I think that's brilliant. So maybe my most memorable review was, again, from Jim Odie. He, you know what he's like with his reviews. And there was a line that made me absolutely wet myself laughing. I'm just seeing if I can just find the review. Here we go. So, the different points of view allow the reader to fully understand the depth of each character. The veil is pulled back slightly, but we are only teased with morsels, a mere nip slip of what they might truly be.
Yeah.
And I have never, ever heard anybody use the word nip slip in a review before, and I thought that was brilliant.
So have you got any exciting projects that you're currently working on, Sarah?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on book 3 and 4, 5 and 6, but book 3 mainly. So I've done psychological horror thriller, that was my first book. I've done slasher horror, that was my second book. And now I'm doing paranormal horror, and the book after that will likely be fantasy horror. So I'm kind of trying to work my way through all the genres and in the horror world, and just see what aligns most with what I want to do. So my next book is called You Invited It In, and I'm about halfway through writing it at the minute. It's about a psychic cleaning service, so it's a little into people's houses who believe experiencing psychic phenomena, and she basically preys on them. She charges people who are grieving, people who are mentally ill, to cleanse their house of evil spirits and whatever. She's one of those, that goes in with the sage and lavender sprays. And in this book, she goes to visit a single father. And after that visit, some terrible, absolutely horrific, spooky things start happening in his house, and he realizes that she may have inadvertently brought something in with her. So I'm really excited about that book, and I love ghost stories, and I love anything paranormal. That's all I watch are horror films, and if it's paranormal, that's always a bonus. Love anything like that. So writing this book, while it's been quite a challenge to be motivated to keep going, I'm really excited for the outcome, and I do think it's going to be the best one yet.
Fantastic. It sounds really good, to be fair. It's a good story. So what advice would you give to aspiring writers who want to break into the horror genre?
Just write. If that you can't edit a blank page, I think Stephen King said that, and even the first pass is always going to be a bit shit. So it doesn't matter. Just write whatever you want to write about, and don't ever let anybody tell you that a certain genre or niche is not marketable. That doesn't matter. We're not all going to be Pulitzer Prize winners, but we can all write a really good story. And success isn't about, having hundreds of thousands of sales and making money off it. Most authors I know make very little off their writing. They all have secondary jobs. So just go into it just give yourself some grace and just write. It doesn't matter what you've got on the page, just write and try and make a habit of it. And this is hypocritical for me to say because I am terrible at this. Even if you just write 300 or 400 words a day, it adds up. So try and get into a habit of doing it. Maybe do it first thing on the morning and then it's done. Just write and reach out to other authors. I love it when people reach out to me, especially because, I'm a fairly small indie author. I love when people reach out and say, what do you think of this idea? Can you maybe give me some advice on this? And find a community that will support you. There's plenty of groups on Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok. I recently joined TikTok and I feel far too old for it. But there are people around that want to help and that will be supportive for no other reason than they want you to succeed. Not everybody's looking for, to make money off you. If you find your people that are supportive and kind and honest, so they'll tell you, if something doesn't work, they're the people that you want around you, and lean on them if they're allowing you to do it. Don't feel bad about it, because we all have to lean on people at different times.
Yeah, that's right. We all need support, don't we?
And it makes it less lonely, because writing a book is a really lonely thing to do. You have to sit by yourself, you have to sit and just write, and it's just you and a blank page and a computer. So if you can find people, especially people that like writing in a similar genre to you, then embrace them with open arms and don't let them go.
That's right. So where can the listeners find your books and follow you?
So my books they're both available on Amazon. It's Sarah Jules. So the books are Don't Lie and Found You. I'm on Instagram. It's at Sarah Jules Writing. I'm on Facebook, and that's Sarah Jules Writing. I'm on TikTok now, which is really embarrassing. And if you want a good laugh, you can definitely just follow that, because I am terrible at it. That's Sarah Jules Author, because somebody had taken Sarah Jules Writing. So I'm all over the place. And Don't Lie is available on more platforms than Found You. So I think it's available on Barnes & Noble and sites like that as well.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun.
You're very welcome.